Hi, everyone. Welcome to the download with Mike Dorezzo and Joel Lowe. Joel, how you doing this week?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hanging in there. So Joel and I thought we'd talk about nightmares of cybersecurity and things that we've encountered in our careers, and
Ooh,
ways to deal with them. So,
right.
things like that. So, Joel, why don't you start us off, man? What's the big thing that scares the heavens out of you?
I think we would go with breaches, right?
Okay.
So, again, we'll break down what a breach is, what an incident is, what an event is. But breaches, from the standpoint, is somebody's in your network.
Hmm.
Something has happened. They're on site, right?
Hmm.
Either digitally or physically, but you have something definitely going on. It's affecting production, perfecting the way you do your normal day to day, right? To me, it's a nightmare from the standpoint of one, figuring out where they are, what's going on, making sure you're communicating with everybody to keep them on the same page. And that is again why you have your disaster recovery, your incident response. You have your executive team go through dry runs of your incident response plan and things of that nature. That's why
Right.
that's important. But
Right.
that's not the nightmare, right? That's
Okay.
that at that time when it happens, you should be primed and ready to go, right?
Right.
Because you've done these things. The nightmare is that you do not have you take on all the risk for these breaches or these incidents or these events without any other authority to fix them without really going through your management and the board. And what I mean by that is you come up and you say, hey, we have this vulnerability or
Hmm.
there's this risk.
Hmm.
There's this chink in the armor that we have, and we really need to fix it. And this tool or this person or this
Right.
patch or whatever it
Or
is
this
fixes
process.
this.
Yeah.
This process, right? Fixes this, and it's going to cost X.
Right.
And what happens is management comes back and says, "Hey, let's wait on that, right? Hey, put it in the next year's budget, right?
Hmm.
And we'll try to do something because right now quarter two wasn't as good as we thought it was. Moving in the quarter three, I just want to get through this year, right?
Right.
Well, the problem is that risk has not left,
Right.
right? That vulnerability is still there. That
Right.
process still has that gap. And now you're accepting this risk, and the problem is you're accepting the risk. Even if you have them sign something off and say what, it doesn't matter because at the end of
Right.
the day, if you do have a breach, um, they're coming back to you,
Right.
right? And you hear most security people joke when you're at events, and they're like, "Yeah, that's an update your resume kind of thing,"
Right.
like, and
Right.
you're like,
Career limiting event. Yeah.
right. And the thing is, you don't hear that in other fields where they're
Not
like, "Hey,
typically. Yeah.
not typically, correct." So again, you have this update your resume because you're going to get fired, but nobody talks about, well, did they do their due diligence, right?
Right.
To tell them, hey, this is what needs to work, but no do correct happened, right? And
Right.
that's not their fault, right? So really trying to figure out that stress level of like, wow, I have to take this on, and now you have to think something outside the box to fix that vulnerability, or at least hold it in,
Right.
so that until you get the proper fix for it, whatever that looks like.
One, and you mentioned like you probably don't own the team that is responsible for that risk, right? So
Right,
there's a lot of working or having your team work with other teams to prioritize, right? And they have their own priorities, like, hey, we want to put in this new storage unit, we want to do this, we're moving
right,
this, we're
right,
implementing this new application. You're like, that's great, but I need you to get rid of that, that old server, or decommission this, or and they're like, I know that's important to you. And Mike McGee has a great line. It's not that I don't care. It's that I don't care as deeply, right? And he's right. It's everybody
right,
has their own priorities. So
correct.
yeah, that's a good point. And so circling back around, even incidents and events can cause a lot of stress, right? They're nightmare inducing. Breaches are one thing, but ransomware is an event, right?
Right,
Not potentially a data breach, but it's still an event. You insider theft, insider damages, malware, things like that, and there could be things that don't even impact you, but they're out there, right? Like
right,
like what they call APTs, advanced persistent threats. You hear about these things, and they're targeting other organizations in your industry, in your vertical, and you're like, and
Right.
so the board's like, hey, I heard this on the news. How do we prepare ourselves against this? And you have to have an answer for that, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of reading, a lot of keeping up. I must get 15, 20 emails from HISAC a day, right? And they're important. You have to read them. I get some from MISAC, which is the manufacturing. Oh, HISAC is healthcare. MISAC is manufacturing. I'm sure you get, FISAC stuff for the financial industry. We have to read these things.
Sands. I
Sands,
get it. Yeah,
yeah,
get one from them as well. Yeah.
yeah. So, and then, obviously there are other ones out there that groups and things like that communicate outward. So you got to, it's stressful. Even if nothing ever happens to you, it's stressful. So, all right,
Right.
let's move on to the next one. We talked about this one before. Hiring talent, finding the right people who can deal with you and all your idiosyncrasies, as well as your team and all of their idiosyncrasies. So, it really, it's not just about that. Personality and team interaction between the team members is highly, highly important. They also
Right.
have to be the right person for the job. I'm looking for a PCI compliance expert, and you have a half a year in PCI. You can spell PCI, and you're like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
this is it. You're the only talent I've been able to find that's
Right.
somewhat interested
Right.
in this job. And if I don't find you, or if I don't bring you in, I've lost you. Right.
Right.
Because this day and
Right.
age, your person doesn't just get your offer, they get your offer and the other 3 companies they've been interviewing with. So,
Right.
lead
I
well,
think
lead in well.
right. I think it's difficult now.
Mhm.
And I feel like every generation might have said that. So I think when I was young in my field, I wonder if people were like, yo, it's so difficult to find great talent, right? But it's special now. Like
Yeah.
I've literally had people disqualify themselves before we even start the interview,
Yeah.
right? I mean, from saying certain things that you're just like, what? Why would you
Yeah.
say that? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? To now, even people get disqualified from like their social media post, right? And I
Right.
tell people you have to watch what you put out there because you're a reflection of the company that's hiring
Right.
you, right? How
Yeah.
many times have you seen somebody have an incident outside of work on a Saturday, and then they bombard social media bombards that company because they hire this person? Like
Right.
it's a
Cancel
thing.
culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's real, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just crazy to one, it's already hard enough to find somebody qualified that has the right temperament that
Yeah.
meets what you need.
And
But
then you got a
then
guy who puts out a cybersecurity vlog.
right, right.
Huh.
Hey, huh. Did I say
But
Joel? My name is Jim.
my name is
Jim Lowe.
Joel Lowe. This is my buddy Mike Derzo. Uh,
Yeah.
eh,
Switch those names,
it's
right?
his
So
names. But yeah, no,
uh
you're right. It's the cancel culture is real, and it's here at least for now, and that's a terrible thing. But you can control that, right? Like,
right,
hey,
right,
and as cybersecurity professionals, obviously, you're like, stay within the law, right? Before you go do something, will this impact my career? Yes, those people are bothering me. Let me just leave. Let me just leave.
right, right,
I don't need to lose
right.
my job or lose my career because I got into a fight and then I've got a nasty court battle. I'm in jail. And you're like, nobody needs that stress.
And
I
it
don't need that
follows you.
stress.
It
Right.
follows you because I can Google, right? I
Yeah.
many times Google the name and be like, "Well, you got arrested 10 years ago. What is again,
Right.
it's not it was 10 years ago, it's you got arrested for
He
assault,
got
right?
arrested. Yeah. The rest of that sentence is unnecessary.
Right. Nobody
Yeah.
cares what came after it. He got
Right.
arrested.
Right.
Nah, we don't need that, right? Nobody wants that headache, right?
Nobody wants, and especially as a CISO, like no one wants that notoriety. Oh, you hired the guy that was responsible for running down those park geese. Yeah. No one wants that.
No,
So,
no, nobody wants that at all.
all right.
Right.
What else you got, Joel? What other
Um,
nightmare inducing events do you have?
so I guess pen testing after a vulnerability scan.
Yeah, I've
Right.
caused that
So
for some people.
right. Right. So a nightmare, right? So you know the vulnerability is there, and then
Right.
the pen tester exploit the vulnerability that you knew was there. It's a nightmare. It's one thing to have a vulnerability identified during a pen
Right.
test that you didn't know about, right?
Right.
That's what I want, right? Because
Right.
those are the ones I didn't know about.
Right.
But to know that it's there, right? And
Mhm.
again, it goes back to what you said earlier about you're not fully responsible, right? So
Right.
my team finds the vulnerability, but it's IT that then has to patch it, right? It's another group that patches that. So I can come to them with a laid out plan of, hey, we need to patch this, and this is why, right?
Mhm.
But if it's not on their, they don't care as deeply, right?
Right.
Then it won't get patched. And
Right.
then what happens is you have this pen test company that comes in, and they then exploit this vulnerability that you told them that was, and then all eyes on you. Why did they? How did they? And you're
Right.
like,
Right.
what do you
Right.
mean? I explained it here. I pointed out here. They didn't
Right.
do it. And then it's like, well, we don't need to point fingers, Joe. We just need to get it
Right. Well,
fixed,
why didn't you tell them it needed to get done? You're like, but
right?
I've told them. Well, and what's even worse is sometimes you'll have said, "Hey, I need this remediation done." And they're like, "Okay, I'll take care of the problem." You're like, "You didn't say you were going to follow my remediation plan. You
Right,
said you would take care of it." And then you have the pen test and you're like, "You didn't take care of it." And they're like, "No, I set this setting." And I'm like, "Yeah, but these were the whole list of recommendations. You didn't turn the page over."
right,
Like, "Oh,
right.
you didn't see the back of the page.
There,
Oh yeah,
there was more,
there was
right?
more." You're like, "You finished the test in 5 minutes. Everybody else is still going." And you're like, "Oh, because there's more than one page. I didn't get the rest of the pages." Yeah.
Right.
Um,
I usually say I always look at those as like a reflection on me. I'm like, did I explain it in a way that
yeah.
made sense? Right. So I'm
Yeah.
always re-looking at, maybe I didn't say, maybe I should have said, hey, here's the page, and then flip on the back. Right.
Right.
There's some more. Right. Maybe I
Right.
missed that. Because to me, common sense is like I would flip on the back. Right. But no. I should have explained that better, is what I always go
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Because my thing is, effective communication is the key to the job, right?
Right.
It's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
So if something was missed, I'm going to put the onus back on me to say, I needed to do something differently,
Yeah.
right? Until we get to a point where then I'm like, no, I did everything. They're just special,
Right.
right? And,
What?
and when we get to they're just special, then, that's totally different.
Yeah. It takes all kinds of people to run the universe. So,
It
um,
does.
all
It
right.
does.
Yeah. That's, you need the corrective action plan. You need to follow up. You need to get updates on things, and then you run the pen test to see if it got done. Right. At the end of the day, be kind to your pen tester.
Right.
Being a pen tester you need to be a special type of person, anyways. I love my pen testing brothers. They do everything they can. They're imaginative. They're ingenious when they come to solving for things. There's a
Right.
guy I know, one of the smartest, sharpest pen testers I know. I think he's 22 now, and just great. But
Right.
he can be frustrating because he's like, I found this and you didn't do anything about it. I found this last time, you didn't do anything about it, and you're like, again, we go back
Right.
to the old Mike McGee saying, it's not that I don't care or not that
Right.
IT doesn't care. It's that they don't care as deeply about solving that problem. That's a security problem in their mind that needs to get solved. So,
And
yeah,
you got to also tell them, like, what bucket did we put that risk in, right? So
right. Is
there's
that a
buckets that we could
critical?
have put in,
Yeah.
right?
Is that a
And we,
critical
we could have
bucket?
accepted that risk, right? We could have mitigated that risk. We could have transferred it over. So we understood and saw what you did, but we decided to then do something else with it, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and that doesn't negate the fact that the risk is there, but it's how we then, do we put a compensating control in it? What do we do uh, to validate that we understood this risk was there? And again,
Right.
you could accept it, and that's perfectly fine. You can say, "Hey, we looked at it, and for what it's going to cost to fix it, and the fact that we're moving to a newer system, a newer server, a new whatever, we don't need it. We don't need to do anything.
Right.
We're going to take on that risk for 6 months."
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
get that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the next one is like risk assessments and audits.
Yeah, probably more audits and risk assessments. I said
Right.
risk assessments, and then you said audit, and I was like,
Audit. Right.
audit. Yeah.
Audit.
So,
Audit.
and this could be self-inflicted risk assessments. They're stressful, right? You're
Hmm.
like, because one, you want the report to be thorough. Two, you
Correct.
got to make sure it stays within the boundaries of what you're trying to cover and support, and expectations of, hey, did you go deep enough? Did you go wide enough? Were you thorough enough? Did you check all the things and things like
Right.
that? But you've been through a few audits, Joel. What's it like?
Audits are terrible, man, and terrible from the standpoint of you can communicate over what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And you're playing. And then when you get the document back, and usually they send you a review document, right? This is what we came up with, and you'll read through it and be like, did they even listen
Right.
to what I
I didn't say
said?
any of
Like,
this.
that's not what we said. And then
Yeah.
it's like their interpretation is almost like playing telephone, right? Not
Right.
telephone, but like pass the message.
Right.
Like somehow across the table, you didn't hear what I said because
Right.
this is not what's reflected. So that's the frustrating part is you really have to be attentive to every stage of the audit, right?
Right.
You can't wait till the final report comes out when you're in the executive room with all everybody else and they're going over the findings because
Right.
it's way too late then,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at this point now we're doing corrective actions, right?
Right.
Versus when you do the final review, you can say, no, that's not correct. We actually do have this plan in place. And I
Right.
showed that to you. Let me get
Right.
that for you again. No,
Right.
we actually do. We have plans on this on the roadmap, or we have a
Right.
control over here to do. Like you literally have to go through each one and correct them because for some reason they hear something different, and
Right.
it could be not from your interview, it could be from somebody else, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, I talked to this person. They said this, but this person does not know what they're talking about because we have
Right.
that, right?"
Right.
And
What
I
question did
was
you ask them? Because that's not the answer they gave me 6 months ago. They
right,
told me we had CASB in place, and you're like,
right,
and you got to run it down again. Like, hold on, let's start an email thread and let's circle it back. But you're absolutely right. So like, even before the report is written, you should do a rundown of the findings. Like, hey, what are the findings that you have, just in case? Because also there's sometimes you're like, I need this to be documented in there.
right,
You didn't talk about this. Let's go ahead and add that because I need that as a corrective action plan. There are cases where you're like, I need to have this. One,
oh
because if you
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah,
have it, you're not getting budget for it, right?
right.
If it's a massively important issue, one, everyone needs to know about it, and two, they need a budget for it. So get it in there. Get that in the report, right? Um,
I agree 100%. And you got to use your auditors to help you, right?
right,
Auditors want to fix stuff. They want to make
right,
sure that that's their job, right? To point
yeah,
out what's not working right.
right,
Use them. If you know that, hey, there's this project that we need to get done that helps us fix something that they've been kicking the can down the road. Hey,
yeah.
I would like for you to look at this and document this. And when it says document it, you have to do something with it,
You got
right?
to do
You
something.
just
Well, and
got to do
and
something.
before your next audit begins, take a look at the report, right? Obviously,
Hmm.
you should be working through the corrective action plans of everything you had on the
Right,
previous audit, but before the audit begins, so like, did I finish everything I said I was going to finish on the previous audit? Because if you
right.
didn't, you better start that before the questions begin, right? Because then it
Or
becomes
document why.
or document, right? I brought this to the senior leadership, but it wasn't important, or we're moving away from this, or we're
Right,
decommissioning these servers at this
right.
date. Yeah, just be prepared to answer those questions.
Correct,
Um,
correct.
and then there's my favorite, policy writing. This is how I
Policy
met our
writing.
friend Joel Lowe to begin with.
This is how we came together.
This is how we
Yes,
came together. Was I
yeah,
wrote policies for Joel as a consultant, and
we did.
it's painful, one, because as a security person, most of the time you're not writing the policy for yourself. Like I always tell
Right,
people, like, you don't write policies for employees, you write policies for auditors. They have to have
correct,
controls in them,
correct.
they have to have measurable results, they have to be
Right,
clear and concise, and
right,
they have to encompass the scope of what you're looking for, right? Most
right.
employees don't care about that. Most employees say, can I download coupons.exe? And you're like, the answer is no, and they're like, okay, I'll move on.
No.
An
Right,
auditor will look at every one of those controls and understand, is it a good control, and
right.
are you effective in carrying it out? um, Joel, you've been on the other side of this as well. What are your thoughts on that? It's terrible.
Um, yeah. So my thing is, it's not that you're not able to write policies,
No.
right? My thing is, I don't have time,
Yeah.
right? So you have to look at your time value, right? Especially when you're in leadership and realize like I want to dedicate my time to these other things that are way, not to say that policy writing is not important because it's quite important,
Oh yeah.
right? But understanding like where you can delegate your time is also a significant sign of a great leader,
Yeah.
right? Somebody that understands like, hey, instead of me doing this, I know that I can hire somebody, a consultant that can write these for me, have a
Right.
conversation with them for an hour, they'll bring something back to me. It checks that box. it makes sense. We can adjust it, and I can still focus on all these other things, these other
Right.
fires, these other situations that we have to put out or deal with. So my thing is, but then if you are writing a policy, don't go verbatim for free policies that are out there, right? Like
Right.
I came into an organization, I'm leading an organization, I'm reading the policies, and I'm
Right.
like, wow, this seems
Strangely
real familiar.
familiar.
Like I've seen this. And again, it's got the logo, the company, and everything. And I start reading. I'm like, where have I read this?
Yeah.
It was Sans document, right?
Yeah.
So Sans has a library of documents for you to use, and they really should be used as like a template, right?
Right. Right.
Not to just take Sans logo off and put your logo and stamp it as good, right?
Yeah.
And that's literally what it was. And I was like, no, we can't do
Yeah.
that.
I copied and pasted mine, but one of the policies of the company I've worked for, and it came right out of NIST. Like it was the controls for NIST, and I'm like, no, there's no policy around that. I'm like, we're not doing any of this,
No,
right? And so go. And I jumped in there. What were you going to say?
no. I was gonna say the worst thing too is when you combine the two, right? So
Right.
audit with policy. So I come
Right.
in, I'm reading through the policies. I'm like, oh, I've had this before. Like, this is a great policy. Oh, wow, okay. This is how we patch.
Right.
We do criticals in 3 days.
Really?
Wow.
You
Okay.
wrote that.
Okay.
Right.
So I go over to the team, have a meeting with them, and I'm like, yo, I am thoroughly impressed with how we patch criticals and highs in 3 days, and then highs in like 7 days. That is impressive.
That's incredible.
Can you walk me through that? Like, how do we set that up? And they're like, 3 days? What are you talking about? And
Who
I was
told
like,
you that?
yo, on the policy, it states that hey, can I see that policy? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you've never seen this before? No.
Right. Right.
And then you're like, oh, we have problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So that you're absolutely correct. Like your policy should reflect reality, not
Period.
the dream state. Reality. Yeah.
Period. And my thing is, it always likes that. Like I'm always reading policies, and then I go to the SME to ask them, is this reflective what you do?
Mhm.
If not, I'm like, let's fix it. Because I can justify or go to bat for my team if I know what we're doing. Right.
Right.
I can give an auditor a clear picture. Hey, we don't patch criticals into 2 weeks, and this is why. Right.
Right.
Versus saying 3 days, and they're like, 3 days, okay. And then they look at all of our evidence, and it's like, hey, this is 14 days.
Right.
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 So you fail.
You have an exception for all of these that are beyond 3 days, right? And you're like,
right.
You use that word exception. What does that mean? You're like, oh,
I've heard of that. What is that? Right.
Yeah.
So what you do is you make more work for yourself because you have to do an exception to your policy. Versus if you state what you do, you don't have to do that. We fall within our policy. Yeah, you may not like our policy, but it's our policy. It's currently where we're at. It's current state. Here's where we're trying to get to. And here's the roadmap to get there.
It is iterative, right? And usually don't change policies very, very frequently. Usually policies are, updated every 3 years or so. You should review them annually, but every 3 years they go through a shift. They're like, well, we should probably do this. And then, the standards or the procedural documents is where you do a fair amount of your change. But yeah, you're right, Joel. Just sit down with the team and go, walk me through how you're doing this, because this is what it's saying you're doing. Let's just match it. Maybe you don't even tell them that there's a document. You just record what they say they're doing and go, okay. And at the end of it, be like, this is what the policy used to say. I'm going to change it to this. Are there any challenges or concerns about that? No? Great. Throw this out. We're going with this.
Or inherited rules, right? Inherited knowledge, right? So I've done audits, and everybody within the team knew that, hey, if this happens, you do this step here. Right. But it wasn't documented. But everybody in the team knew it. So I came over and I would ask questions like, hey, I just noticed this here. Like, if this happens, what do you do? Because I don't have that documented. And they're like, oh, everybody knows you just click this and do this here. And I'm like,
everybody knows. Yeah.
Well, what if the whole team wins the lottery tomorrow? Right. And none of us know. Right. So could we write that down? Right. And my thing is, there's a lot of knowledge that goes in between departments and people that within that department that they just, hey, click this, add that, it's good. Right. That we need to document, right? Because we don't know. And the worst feeling ever is somebody leaves and you're now trying to figure out what they did, right?
Yeah.
How
That's
they
a
did.
terrible time.
Oh, how did he used to do this? And there's
Right.
nowhere documented, right?
Right.
I don't know how he did this.
And they're
But
the only person. There was no cross training, or the person they cross trained left before they did, and they
right,
never picked another one. Yeah,
right.
mm,
Which we went to nightmares. That's another nightmare,
that's
right?
another
You
nightmare.
lose somebody, and you don't have the budget to rehire somebody because you're on a freeze,
Right.
right? So
Right.
now that knowledge is left, and you have nobody to back up with that, and you're shifting people around.
Right.
Nightmare situation.
Now the sun will come up tomorrow. You'll figure a way out of it, right? I mean,
You'll make it
it's yeah. I've been there where like you let who go, or somebody left, and
right.
we didn't. Why did they leave? Well, they weren't happy. You're like, well, they didn't just wake up this morning as I'm not happy. They've
Correct.
probably been unhappy for a while.
Correct.
What could we have done better in this situation? So I'd make sure, it's one thing to have one nightmare, but usually like people leave in droves. They don't just, like, hey, that one guy left and we haven't had a single other person leave for 5 years. And you're like, no, 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 no.
Nah.
Usually if
Right.
if more than one person leaves, it's endemic of the leadership, problems there that need to be
Or the
solved.
culture.
Yeah,
Right.
or the culture. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, culture does a lot if for a human being, and sometimes if it's toxic, you got to solve it. You got to solve
Right.
it quick, or you're going
Right.
to hemorrhage talent at some point, right? That
Yeah.
happened to a
I've seen
company
it.
I worked for. That this couple handful of people left. They communicated back to the inside because they had lunch with them, 2-3 weeks in, and they hear like, oh no, yeah, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't call people out in the middle of meetings, and we don't do this. You're like,
Right.
I need to get out of this current job and go to a job like that. Are you guys hiring?
Right.
Sure. So
Yep.
that's a challenge. So let's roll over the takeaways. Be prepared to hear bad news from pen tests and audits. And you had a good point, Joel. You said don't view it as bad news.
I mean, so don't look at it as bad news, because the only way you can fix something is you have to know about it.
Right,
Right. So any news they give you, just consider it constructive feedback, right?
right,
Or identifying, a situation that you need to focus and really spend time on. And like we said before, you can use an audit to your advantage, right?
right.
You
You
can tell
should
them,
use an
hey,
audit. Yeah,
you should, right? Just like you can use a good breach or
right.
incident to your advantage, right? If and not even yours, somebody else's. Those are the best ones, right? When one of your competitors or a fellow has a
That
situation,
yeah,
you're like, that could have been us.
that
You
could have
know,
been us.
here's what we need to do, right? And
Or here's what I've
never
been telling you we need to do, which
right,
is even better, right? You're like,
right.
I've actually been telling you guys about this.
I've said that many times. So that would be one. Don't look at it as bad news. Look at it as an
Right,
opportunity, right? You can't fix what you don't know,
right.
right? Empathize, sympathize. This is something that you said for those around you. I thought that
Right.
was brilliant.
Yeah, because like I said, usually as security and cybersecurity people, you are not the ones that remediate and solve. It's usually IT, it's DevOps, it's HR, it's all these other teams. Treasury, like I'm working on PCI compliance. Our treasury team does a lot, and they need information, and it's like I have people asking me for budgetary numbers, and you're like, I'm actually waiting on these people understand they just got done with tax season.
Right,
So we're trying to get budgetary numbers from people who were knee deep in taxes and they're coming up for air. You have to empathize and sympathize with these people. You have to make friends and influence people, or influence people and make friends out in the world.
right, right,
Um, I joked with my team when I came on board that I was buying them all the book. Was it Making Friends and Influencing People? It's the
right. Yeah, yeah,
Carnegie
yeah,
book,
yeah.
but it's so true. It's we're not the no police. Like, no, you can't do that. We are the no police. Hey, I need to know about it so that we can fix it, so that we can remediate it, so we can draw attention
Correct,
to it and solve that problem. I'm not here to make enemies. I'm here to help you, IT person, or you, DevOps person, or you, programmer, or developer, or program manager. I'm not here to cause problems, and
right.
that's a skill, right?
Yep,
That's a soft skill that we as a profession don't get a credit for that we have,
right,
but we have to do it in order to be successful. A good CISO definitely has that ability to just
correct.
say, I understand this isn't important to you, but here's what happens if we don't do this, right? And oh, by the way, the people above you know about this, so they're looking at the two of us to pull together and solve this problem. It's huge. It's you have to do it. So
I think it goes right into the next one of like being able to be an effective storyteller, right?
yeah,
Effective communicator, right?
yeah,
You this job is 100% about effectively communicating, right?
right,
Telling the story or explaining the situation in such a way that they can understand it, right? That they hear it and say, okay, I get it, right?
right,
Yeah, we can't do nothing now, but I understand that's important, Joe. So that when something does come up, you can come back to it and they remember it, triggers something for them. And if it can trigger something for them where they will remember that story you told, then you're doing your job, right? So if
right,
you say, hey, you remember last month I talked to you about this incident here and I explained to you this way. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Okay, hey, we still have that situation. And because of this, this is what happened at this other company. So
right,
we must fix this now,
right,
right? Giving them an analogy, right? I always say have a good analogy in your back pocket
right,
that they can relate to, right? So whatever they're into, be able to understand it in such a way that you can explain the situation of what you're trying to effectively communicate to them in that analogy,
right,
right? So if
right,
it's football, if it's basketball, if it's golf, right? Explain it in such a way that they are like, okay, I get that, Joel, right?
right.
Break it down for them.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. It's not a lot of leadership is technical, right? Your CIO may not be as technical as you or because they're problem solvers and they find the right people, right? People
Right,
in leadership aren't in leadership because they're excellent at being a forensics person or excellent at a pen test or excellent at this. They're there because they know how to interpret information and
right,
solve problems and bring in the right people and identify it and communicate upwards. So,
right,
if you want to be a good CISO or a good leadership person, learn how to communicate effectively upwards. It's something I'm always learning better ways to do and learning more tools and tactics of how to do that and everything else. But telling that story in such a way that it matters to the person you're communicating with, right?
right,
When you're communicating to a treasury person, they're not going to care that this that somebody could leverage this and break into this and do this and that and the other thing. They care of, will I be able to do payroll on Thursday? Will I
right,
be able to report out
right,
my numbers effectively every day, every morning when I come in? Will that system be up and running? Will
correct,
and find a way where it matters to that person, right? Again, you don't want to hear it's not that I don't care, as I don't care as deeply. Make that person care deeply, right? Find a
right,
way for that person to care deeply. Everybody has a trigger, everybody has a
right.
tell, everybody has a way that they're like, whoa, run that back again.
Yeah,
That suddenly like clues into me, that keys into me. Tell me more about that. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this is what it looks like. And you're like,
mhm,
why didn't you start with that? And you're like,
right. Did not know.
because I'm learning to communicate effectively with you just
Right,
now, and I've never
right,
and I've met some senior level executives. Obviously, as a consultant, sometimes it's the first time you're meeting them and you're trying to communicate, and you get some board members where you're mid sentence and you get the stop talking hand, and you're
right,
like, the next things out of my mouth are going to be so key. I've got to keep talking.
right,
And I keep talking in spite of them going, enough, I've heard enough. You're like, no, 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 let me get this one part out. You'll understand.
right,
And
right,
you say it
right,
and they're like, oh, okay. Now that's something I need to learn is, you buried the lead. You should have put the more important thing in front and then talk about the details why, right? So it's a pyramid
right.
of information, your critical
Always
key
start with the
points.
critical information. Yes.
Right. And then as you go down, you get more and more detail, right? So senior
Right,
leadership needs to know, hey, you're on fire. The second tier
right,
down needs to go, hey, it's an engine fire. Third tier down needs to go, hey, it's an engine fire and it's been there for 4 hours and we're
right,
running low on water and about like
right.
it needs to be the triangle of communication. So
Correct.
all right, Joel, any wrapping thoughts?
I think the last thing is just making sure that also all that's going on, find
Mhm.
a good outlet, right? So
Yeah, that's
with
something
your
we didn't talk
stress
about.
levels, with so much stuff going on, there's statistics now coming out that leadership in cybersecurity, they're getting divorces, they're having drinking problems. Like find an outlet. There's a lot of stress on you, and sometimes you need to step away, right? And do something different. Find something different. Find an outlet, right? If it's going golfing, if it's outside just yelling, like I don't care what it is, go running. Figure out what it is, right?
Right.
And make sure it's a healthy outlet, right? I don't want you.
Healthy.
Yeah,
Healthy
that's the
outlet.
key. But figure out something. Step away for a second.
Yeah.
Like I know it's hard for people to believe this. The company will go on if you step away for an hour,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
will. Hey, if you need to take a vacation and actually take off. So that's my new thing now. Like I was telling you before, I'm gonna take a vacation and I'm actually gonna take the whole 5 days off.
Yeah.
Like the phone will be off. I'm gonna enjoy this
Yeah.
vacation. Because guess when I come back, the work will still be there.
Right.
But that
Right.
that one or two emails is not necessary for them to go on. They'll be
Right.
okay.
Yeah. And
Right.
communicate with your team like, hey, I'm going on vacation this month. Here's the things that I handle on a weekly basis, right? So
Right.
your team, your peers and everything else, if you have employees underneath you, just communicate, hey, this is who you're going to work with. Da, da, da. I make sure that I'm not on vacation the same time my boss is on vacation. We
Right.
make sure that there's always communication channels and that I can
Right.
get a hold of the people, his boss, if I need to. And yeah, you have to unplug. You've got to
Right.
exercise. You've got to, take care of yourself physically and mentally as well. Um, and yeah, like I play guitar, I play video games. I work out when I can. We go for walks. My wife and I go on walks together.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to get out. You got to get out and you got to save time. We're going for a walk this evening, right before dinner. And, I walk the dogs every morning and afternoon. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Do
hyper
something.
important,
Yep.
hyper
Yep.
important. So,
Well,
all right. Well, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the vlog here. Let us know in the comments below if you like what you heard, you want to hear something different. You think Joel is a sexy beast. Whatever. We'll take a constructive criticism. But, let us know if there's something that you want to hear about or learn about in the future and more episodes on the way. We try and do this at least once a week and publish them.
yeah.
We'll get 2 this week because I forgot to publish last week's. But if you want, just hit the subscribe button up here and we'll go through. I'm also going to start adding these to Facebook. So Facebook friends, this is what I've been up to all these years since I graduated high school. So
Yes.
Joel, anything you want to add? Parting thoughts?
Hey, knowing it's half the battle. Y'all take care.
No one is, and the other half is actioning appropriately. Yep.
Right. Right.
It's what
G.I.
G.I. Joe
Joe.
never told you.
Never
It's like
did.
they wanted you to fail because they
It
never
was like,
told you the
you
other half.
figure it out. You
Right.
figure it out.
Knowing is half. Wait, Joe, what's the other half of the battle there? And they're like, killing the enemy.
I don't know how that works for a 7-year-old, right?
No one died at G.I. Joe. And you're like,
Right.
that's why you only got half the battle.
Half the battle.
Half
You
the
take care.
battle. All right, everyone. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.